So it is getting to be about that time where we get back into the thick of the NBA draft and draft prospects. The NBA draft is a little over a week away on June 23rd. It's a night that NBA players never forget, that moment that their name is called by the NBA commissioner. And for the Chicago Bulls, they'll be drafting in the first round for the first time since drafting Patrick Williams 4th overall in the 2020 draft, although you could argue they drafted a first-round talent in the second round last season in Dosunmu. But this year, the Bulls will be drafting 18th overall, which will be their only pick, as they do not have their second-round pick this draft. And despite the pick being a mid-first rounder, there is still a lot of potential and talent the Bulls could select with that pick. Or, of course, they could always be trading that. And I mean trading the player, because the Bulls actually cannot trade the pick itself, but they can trade the actual player after making the selection. But anyway, in today's video, we're going to be going over some of the top prospects that are expected to go around that time that the Bulls will be on the clock. So what's going on, everyone? You are listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Now, I've mentioned this a few times on the channel, so apologies for reiterating this for those who tune in frequently, but I am by no means a draft expert. It's one of the areas of following and talking about the NBA that I have never really been that vested in, because I really don't watch college basketball at all. I watch some, really very little of the Euro League, so I really have no idea who the up-and-coming prospects are until really the weeks leading up to the draft, with the exception, of course, when there are generational type talent players like a Zion Williamson, Luka Doncic, Cade Cunningham, those types of players. But when the Bulls are not in a rebuild, where they're not tanking for a top pick, I'm not as closely following the up-and-coming prospects entering the league. So I just wanted to put that out there as a caveat, that my draft assessments in the league are probably not as great as some other networks that do this for a living. But with all of that being said, let's talk about some of the prospects that either worked out with the Bulls already or are expected to go around the 18th mark in the draft. Now, I did a video on Kai Soto already, as he worked out with the Bulls a couple weeks ago. And if you caught that video, you heard my thoughts on him as a prospect. I don't think he has the talent to go that high in the draft. If anything, I think the Bulls likely worked him out in the event that they trade down for the pick to go into the second round. But I already talked a lot about Kai Soto, so I won't be focusing on him that much in this video. But where I actually wanted to start was with Liddell, who was another prospect that had to work out with the Bulls recently. Now, Liddell, the forward out of Ohio State, stands 6'7", 243 pounds. He's an older rookie prospect at the age of 21 compared to most players coming into the league after their freshman season at the age of 19. But the Bulls have had success drafting older players in the past, most recently Dosunmu, who is also 21. Further in the past, Jimmy Butler, Taj Gibson. I mean, historically speaking, the Bulls have liked players having that increased maturity going into the NBA when they're looking to draft players that are more NBA ready rather than future projects, which, with where the Bulls are at right now, are likely more focused on players who can create an immediate impact, even in a role player capacity, than a player who is more of a project that won't see rotational minutes until a few years from now. What I like about Liddell is that he's a pretty versatile player with strong two-way potential. He finished his junior season with Big Ten All-Defense honors and was an All-Big Ten player. He has improved substantially with every season in college by becoming a better player on offense as well. More specifically, his improved outside shooting. Liddell went from shooting 19% from three in his freshman season to 37% in his junior year. I mean, you look at his numbers from the past season with Ohio State, and it's very impressive, averaging near 20 points per game, 7.9 rebounds, 2.6 blocks, and doing all of this on 49% shooting. He's even shown to be an effective playmaker with his passing ability. I mean, Liddell can play the 3 or 4 and even some small ball 5 if the Bulls really needed him to. What I also like about Liddell is his tenacity and energy that he brings to the court. People always talk about how the Bulls need those type of dog-like mentality players on their roster. EJ would be one of those guys, at least based on what he has shown in college. Player comparisons I've seen made to Liddell are guys like Paul Millsap, Grant Williams, PJ Tucker, even Draymond Green, all of which are tenacious defenders, and we all know the Bulls could use some more defense in the front court. My only hesitation with Liddell is that he may turn out to be a bit undersized relative to the type of role that the Bulls would need him to play, but that's a pretty minor concern. If I'm being honest, Liddell would actually be my ideal pickup in the draft relative to the rest of the prospects that I'll be discussing, but I actually think he's probably going to come off the board a little earlier than that 18th pick. The next prospect I wanted to talk about was Walker Kessler, who is likely another player that will be gone by the 18th pick, but he is slated to be a mid-first rounder, and given the fact that he's a 7'1", 256-pound center who is an incredible shot blocker and rim protector, he's another prospect you have to look at given the needs of the Bulls. Kessler is a 20-year-old out of Auburn who actually transferred to Auburn from North Carolina after his freshman year when he wasn't getting a lot of playing time with the Tar Heels. Kessler finished his sophomore season averaging 4.6 blocks per game, which was second in the entire NCAA. He also averaged 11.4 points per game, 8.1 rebounds. I mean, you want to talk about defense, the guy was the SEC Defensive Player of the Year as well as first team All-SEC. He's not a three-point shooter, although he can shoot it from outside. He's not one of these big men who just doesn't shoot threes at all. He did shoot 20% from three on 50 attempts in his sophomore year. And the idea is because he actually has a jump shot from mid-range, he can continue to work on his outside shooting to help space the floor. One of the player comparisons I've seen as far as Kessler's game and how it's modeled after his Rudy Gobert, which is kind of timely since everyone has been talking about all the trade rumors surrounding the Bulls being interested in pursuing Rudy Gobert this offseason. Kessler might be that version that you one day develop into a Rudy Gobert, but obviously is not going to be that guy for a few years while he develops in the NBA. But either way, it's an intriguing option for the Bulls simply by the fact that the Bulls need size, they need rim protection, and a backup big behind Vucevic, assuming he's still with the Bulls, which I think he will be, is something the Bulls could certainly use considering they really didn't have a reliable backup big behind Vooch. Next up, I want to do Terry Eason, another guy who worked out with the Bulls recently. Eason is a 6'8 forward out of LSU, another 21-year-old. So again, a lot of prospects that are in the mid-first round are generally college players who have played more than just their freshman year. This is also another strong defensive player, but actually showcased in his sophomore season to be a very sound offensive player as well, by more than doubling his points per game from his freshman year to sophomore year, averaging near 17 points per game along with 6.6 rebounds. On the defensive end, he's got really quick hands, great on-ball defender that can pester players without committing fouls. He's also a solid shot blocker for his size. He ended up averaging 1.1 blocks per game and 1.9 steals in his sophomore year. And he also shot 52% from the field and 36% from three. Eason also won Sixth Man of the Year this past season in his conference, which if you remember, Patrick Williams also won that award for his respective conference when he was at FSU. What's also funny to me is that people have compared Eason to Kawhi Leonard more than anything because of his massive hand size, but also by the fact that he has strong two-way playing capabilities with how he's been able to improve his offensive game after what was initially looked at as just being a primarily defensive-minded player. This is another intriguing prospect for the Bulls because he can play the 3 or 4, is very athletic, a great wing defender. If the Bulls let Derrick Jones Jr. walk in free agency, which I suspect that they will, this could be a good option that will help you fill out that role and a player that you can also still continue to develop for the future. Another guy I like is Blake Wesley out of Notre Dame. This is one of the few guard prospects that caught my eye because really the Bulls already have too many guards as it is, assuming they retain Zach Lavine and Kobe White also remains with the team, which I think there are a lot of people anticipating that Kobe will be moved this offseason, but for now, he's still with the team. But Wesley is a 6'4 combo guard, and what's intriguing about him is that he rose so dramatically in his freshman season from being a high school recruit that wasn't even ranked in the top 100, was initially coming off the bench as a freshman for Notre Dame, to quickly being inserted into the starting lineup with a strong two-way play, and ultimately ended up finishing his freshman season taking all SEC honors for a guy who wasn't even expected to get a ton of playing time in his freshman year. To quickly rise like that at the collegiate level at the age of 18 is impressive to say the least, and because you saw such a dramatic improvement in his game, it leads one to believe that he's going to continue to develop further given the fact that he's only 19 with his stock rising so much. He declared for the NBA draft when he was once viewed as a potential 4-year college player. I mean, in his freshman season, he averaged 14.4 points per game, 3.7 rebounds, 2.4 assists, and 1.3 steals. His defensive tenacity combined with his playmaking and scoring on offense makes him a prospect a lot of teams are going to be looking out for. He's great at getting to the bucket on the dribble drive, but he does need to work on his shooting a bit, which was pretty inconsistent last season. He can shoot from outside, but he needs to work on his shot selection from deep. He only shot 30% from 3, and he's not a good free throw shooter, only shooting 65% from the line. Now, I would find it hard to believe that the Bulls would take Wesley at 18 because they really don't need any more guards with the crowded backcourt they currently have. And as good as Blakely's rise has been, from not being a prominent high school recruit to now being a one-and-done player out of college, I don't think he's going to go as high as 18. I think he's a player that will likely fall in the 25 to 30 range in the draft unless some team is really in desperate need of some backcourt depth. Or, of course, if he just really wows scouts and workouts leading up to the draft. We've seen players' draft stock rise dramatically in the final week leading up to the draft. Just take a look at a player like Patrick Williams as an example. I mean, there are other players that I think could be solid options for the Bulls as well if available. 18. Mark Williams is another great prospect out of Duke, another big man with strong shot blocking ability. He's 7 foot, 242 pounds, improved quite a bit from his freshman to sophomore season, finishing the year averaging 11.2 points per game, 7.4 rebounds, and 2.8 blocks. This would be another backup 5 option for the Bulls, similar to what Walker Kessler could provide, but I think Mark Williams likely is going to go before 18. I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up in the late lottery with the way his stock has been rising recently. Jalen Williams is another guy to look at, but another guy who I think will go before 18, another big man at 6'10" who can play the 4 or 5, had a massive jump in his play from his freshman to sophomore season, very athletic, good footwork for his size, strong rebounder, he can even shoot the 3, although he needs to work on his efficiency from deep, whereas Mark Williams doesn't shoot 3s at all, and he's also improved defensively in his sophomore year. So again, a lot of bigs who are strong defenders that the Bulls could be looking at to beefing up the front court and add some rim protection. That being said though, I do think it would make the most sense for the Bulls to be focusing on improving their bench, defense, and rim protection via free agency as opposed to the draft by acquiring players who are already established in the league rather than project players who may not pan out in the NBA. But these are all still options that are development pieces that you can work with for the future if you're the Chicago Bulls. There are some prospects that I did not cover. I might cover them in another video, but these are the guys that really stood out to me from what we can expect going into next week's draft. I would love to hear what you guys think, though. Who are you going to be looking at as the Bulls get on the clock at 18 in the draft next Thursday? Let me know in the comments, and as always, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.